There we go. We should be up and live and running now. Um, Good morning. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Happy
Welcome to the
Valentine's Day.
Rebel Roundtable.
So glad
Thanks
to be
for being
spending
here,
it with
Robyn.
you.
There's no one I'd rather spend Valentine's Day with than my favorite divorce attorney.
Yay.
So, I am your host, Rebel Esquire, otherwise known as Jen Lee. And today I have Robyn Ginney, who is a California based attorney. And she is the one who focuses on the knockdown, drag out, litigious fights that a lot of divorce attorneys don't like to do. And so she especially loves looking at litigation abuse, divorce terrorism. And then she also speaks to consults nationally on these types of cases. And I love the fact that we're here on Valentine's Day talking about crazy divorce and things like that. So, welcome to the show, Robyn.
Thank you. People behaving badly. That's what we
People
do.
Well, and we kind of do have some people behaving badly in all kinds of areas these days,
We
don't we?
do. Yes, we do.
And so, as everybody knows, this is not scripted. I ask people kind of what their themes are they want to talk about, and no one has any idea what we're going to talk about. But one thing that Robyn and I haven't really talked about our thoughts on, but she put down was the idea of non lawyers owning law practices. And this has come up in several states where they've had a legislation or the bar is considering allowing non lawyers to own practices. And usually, what it looks like is right now, you can't have like a partner who's an accountant. You can't have like everyone has to be a lawyer who's an owner of a firm. So I'm curious to see, Robyn, do you think that having non lawyers as owners of law firms is a good idea, a bad idea? Where are you at on that spectrum?
Uh, I think it's a bad idea to take somebody who isn't an attorney and allow them to own a practice. I
Okay.
think it is inevitable, but I don't think it's a good idea. My concern isn't just having a CPA as a partner. I mean, I
Yes.
actually think it would be great for a firm, especially what I do because I partner with CPAs so much. It would be great to be like, you know what, I'm just going to have you work with our CPA who's on our staff, who's invested in my business, right?
Yep.
In my head, I always thought it would be great if I could just like take an entire floor of a building and I'd have my probate attorney and I'd have my person who does wills and trusts and writing the wills and trusts, and I've got my CPA and I've got a therapist and I've got all of these people that I
Yep.
could sort of call on. I think that would be great from being able to support my client perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But if all of the people on that floor worked, I was going to say somebody's name, but I shouldn't. For a very rich independent party. Um,
Oh,
I
Robyn.
I think that would be bad. Um, yeah, because then you're talking about because corporations are considered individuals, right? So you would
Right.
have corporations that are owning law firms, and you're perilously close to that right now. There are a couple of sort of big box law firms that are already proliferating all over the United States, but they are owned by attorneys. If they could get investor funding from somebody that isn't an attorney, then here's my problem. You have people who are invested, like I am invested in my client's outcome. And
Right.
I will do whatever I can to a certain amount. But if you're going to spend $100,000 chasing $20,000, I'm going to tell you that that's not the best use of your funds. If I have to report to my board of directors and say, I told the client that we
To
didn't
spend
want to
less
incur
money.
another $100,000. I went for the 20,000. I don't want to have my job
Yep.
accountable to somebody who's more interested to make money than the client's best interest. And I think that is also inevitable if we do that.
I agree to some extent. So I am on the other side of, I think it's inevitable. I agree with that. But I also think that there are a lot of opportunities to do it correctly. But there's always going to be that, okay, who's going to take this too far and create like a dashboard of profitability where you have to decide to spend $100,000 versus 20,000. So I do think there's this slippery slope of nonsense that could happen. And
Mhm.
of course, the people who are supporting this are the ones who are like, and I won't bash like specific industries, but the broad one out there is like financial planners offering estate planning services. We see a lot of this these
Yeah.
days where the software can create an estate plan. And is that practicing law? Is it not? And I do think it's inevitable. I think there's a lot of opportunities for lawyers who do it correctly, but there's a lot of opportunity for abuse to happen and it not to be in the legal client's best interest. So we're not too far apart on it. I just think that
Yeah.
I tend to look at it from the innovation side and how could I make this work
Mhm.
versus the protectionism side more than
Yeah.
anything.
I mean, I think it would be great that, like, you and I are in different states.
Yeah.
If I could open a law practice in Washington or North Dakota or New
Yeah.
York and not have to take another bar exam, because I'm never doing
Yes.
that again. But if
You don't
I
have to take a
owned a
bar exam in North Dakota, but you can
I
just raise them
yeah,
in North Dakota.
I'm not interested in going there anytime soon. But maybe that may change very
But
quickly.
it's a good point. It's a good point of what you're saying is the regulation of lawyers from state to state
Mhm.
could be changed dramatically and lawyers could still own law firms and be in other states.
Yeah. And then I could advise, I
Yeah.
could be, I'm going to go to the North Dakota branch, I'm going to go to the Washington branch and meet with these particular clients. And I can give
Yeah.
a certain amount of legal advice with somebody who's barred in that state to be like, to check my facts. That
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
be, that would be great from a client service perspective.
Mhm.
Um,
And I think a lot of this has to go back to what best serves the client. As a bankruptcy attorney, having a CPA as my partner would have been fantastic because a lot of my clients didn't have tax returns done. They didn't have things done. And I would constantly have to refer them out and get releases and all kinds of things to try to get it done. And it would have been great, but there is that opportunity for, and it almost, if you've thought about it, I don't know if you have, but it's almost like healthcare. Like, is it going to be like a control over our healthcare like insurance
uh,
companies have if
yeah.
we go to that kind of model where we're
Yeah.
rationing almost what happens with things?
Yeah. Like, okay, I've got this trial that's based entirely on emotional psychology issues. There's no numbers involved. Do I have to run that by my board before I say, we got attorney's fees that are coming at the end of this? If I win, I get attorney's fees. If I don't get attorney's fees. That's not really how my practice works.
Right, right.
But like,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
that was, do I have to run those decisions by a board before I do that? But
And then, yeah,
as kind of like a parallel point to what you were just saying about CPAs, I think eventually law firms are going to get to that sort of demarcation like we do with taxes now. You've got
yeah,
turbo taxes for the people who think they could kind of get it. You've got like the advanced plan for turbo tax where it's sort of like, I think I got it, but I'd still like to talk to somebody maybe when I get to that,
yeah,
rough patch. And then you've got your H&R blocks, which I believe are not owned by CPAs. They're owned by a corporation. And that's going to be like for people who want like a mediated divorce, or we have an agreement, but we don't know how to write it up.
yeah,
So I think there's always going to be these sort of like, I need a really quick will and trust, or I've got 3 businesses and 2 exes and 6 kids and royalties coming in. I need a will drawn up and an estate drawn up for that. You're
right,
not going to do that with the TurboTax equivalent of an estate
right.
planning software. So there's always going to be these niches that
Yeah.
exist even when, law
But I
becomes,
think that's where some of the innovation can come from too, is there are people that
yes,
need, and from an access to justice, like if you went and told your board, non-lawyers that you're going to do a pro bono case,
right.
and they're only about the numbers, are they going to be like, oh, you can't do pro bono? I don't want to remove pro bono and what we're able to do
Right.
now with pro bono. But then on the other side, are there software, there are innovators and programmers out there that could do some of the access to justice? And there's a lot of stuff in this space. There's a lot of AI going on with access to
Yeah.
justice. And so
I think
it's just
that
lots of opportunity. Yeah.
I think there's huge opportunity, and I think the space is wide open right now for somebody to sort of pioneer that. And I
Yeah.
think that's where we're heading. I
Yeah.
think what people are getting wrong, though, in selling AI to attorneys, at least from my perspective, is they're saying, oh, it can decrease your billable hours. Like, don't sell that to an
So
attorney.
let's discuss that, because I
Like,
think that's
let's
great,
discuss.
because then we get rid of the billable hours and we actually start billing on value, and you make more money if you don't have to sell hours. But that's a whole, like, we could go on for
I
hours
get
about
that.
that.
Yeah. If you're
Yeah.
doing a flat fee and it used to
Right.
take 15 hours to do something and now AI does it in two, but you charge the same amount, that's
Yeah.
awesome. The problem is that it's you've got the sort of McDonald's situation with that,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
people know that it's taking you less time because you're using AI, but they're still getting gypped by paying the same value that they used to pay before you started using AI.
And that's a messaging issue. Then you need to
That is
work
a
on your
message.
value prop. Then you need to work on what your value proposition is,
Exactly.
and how you're illustrating the benefit they're getting from your fee, no matter if it's hourly or AI. But yes,
Mhm.
I think we probably should schedule like 3 more follow-ups and go through some of that. We'll be here all day. So interesting. I appreciate, like I said, I like to see both sides of it. I think that the bureaucracy of lawyers is making this, they're so protectionist that they won't entertain anything related to changing the status quo on lawyers. And so that's what I kind of buck against a lot of times, is all
Yeah.
the big bar associations and the big um, red tape of saying, oh, we can't do anything, any innovation at all, because
Oh,
that would ruin
yes.
the profession. So that's where I come in as the rebel a lot of times. So
Yeah.
um
Agree with that because well, like 5, 10 years ago, people thought websites was like a brand new thing and it was a scary new venture. Like there were a lot of attorneys that were like, why do I need a website? Like, and
I
that was
still get that
wrong.
from some people. Why do I need to? I'm
Yes.
referral based. I'm like, your
Right.
referrals are still going to your website to look at how,
Yeah.
professional you are and what your message is. So, okay, well, let's talk about divorce then, because it's Valentine's Day
Oh, okay.
and we need to talk about divorce, right?
Right.
Um, one of the things that you had brought up, and I've heard mentioned, and I ran across this in practice too, was there's been some proposals out there to limit the reason for getting divorced. Talk about that a little bit. Like, what
Mhm.
does this look like?
So with many things with the new administration, I don't think anybody knows what this looks like. Um, what it used to look like in California and a lot of other states is that it was a fault divorce. And there was only a
Okay.
couple of reasons why you could get a divorce. It was abandonment or abuse, essentially neglect. Um, and you had to
Okay.
prove that, or somebody had to fall on their sword. Like, you're right. I will say that I was abusive so that you can get your divorce. Um, so that's when we used to use a lot of private investigators. We used to have jury trials for a divorce because you had to meet that threshold burden of these things happened.
Sounds very antiquated.
It's very antiquated because in like wrapped up in this fault divorce is also the fact that women couldn't get their own credit cards, they couldn't own property outright. So there were a lot of rights that were tied the woman to the man. So they kind of saw it as very protectionist to the women, like, oh well, this man just can't like simply up and leave. He can't
Mm,
divorce her unless she was a bad wife. I think that was in some way trying to protect women, although usually no laws that are antiquated ever protected women.
right.
So the no fault divorce actually not only decreased a lot of like the statistics of divorce decreased. Divorce actually went down when they made it no fault.
Oh, interesting.
But attendant with the no fault is they rolled in a lot of spousal support protections and a lot of
Mm,
child support protections that are statutory. It's not just a handshake agreement between spouses.
okay.
So I have no
So,
idea what they're planning on doing.
so I have heard that they want to get rid of that no fault. Like, that was my,
Mhm.
and not as a divorce attorney, just as like seeing, and who knows what we're reading wherever is actually.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the third dimension these days or something like that. But it, so getting rid of no fault, it seems like that would be a really bad idea, because why would you want to stay somewhere? Like, why would you want to force people to be miserable?
Yeah.
That's to my thought. It's
Yeah.
like, that's basically what it does, right?
It's bad for the kids, it's bad for her finances. But here's the thing, going back to our original point, if you have to have a jury trial to get divorced, then divorce is no longer something that can be done by a cookie cutter
Right.
pop up. There's no mediated divorce anymore. There's somebody has to admit fault and then you mediate divorce. But that's a
Hmm.
lot easier to do when, you know, if you're a celebrity, now you
Yes.
like all of your
Yeah.
stuff is public, social
Yeah.
media.
Yeah.
If anybody says, "Oh yeah, you're right, I'm abusive," just to be like, I
You
want
would
to let
destroy
you
your
guys,
career. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and it'll never go away now. So I think it's a huge step back for everybody because it makes my job a lot more interesting. But when my job is interesting, it's really expensive for my client.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking. Like, is this being driven by big divorce? Like, is there a big divorce behind this, trying to force people to do this because it'll now cost $100,000 for every divorce kind of
No,
discussion?
no divorce
Yeah.
lawyers think this is a good idea. No,
Okay.
no,
Um,
because it's so hard to prove abuse now. And
yes.
that's kind of a twofold problem. One is that there's a lot of psychological abuse that the courts still don't even recognize. But also, there's a lot of people that think things are abusive when really they're just hypersensitive or they're just like bad together, but they're not abusive people. They just are toxic when they're
Right.
together.
Right.
So
Yeah.
proving abuse in court is always sort of a managing the expectations of the judge and trying to frame a narrative so it doesn't sound like, you both are just horrible people throwing things at each other. It's hard enough to prove that now. And now you've got, a jury of your peers who are
We don't.
scrutinizing what you wear and looking at your Instagram history. And, it's a different ballgame now. But
And it seems to, I run across financial abuse a lot as a bankruptcy attorney. We'd be
mm,
trying to either all the debt was in the abused spouse's name, all kinds of things would go on. And that almost never could get, like, we couldn't ever get that proven on the divorce side of things. Like, unless it was really blatant, judges didn't even recognize financial abuse as far as I could see.
yeah. And
Um, they
adding
just
that
didn't get it.
language into the abuse code section is a recent development. Only in the
Yeah.
last 2 years have they actually added coercive control, which is like, how do you define coercive control to a judge who has never been in an abusive relationship, who doesn't know anybody who's been in an abusive relationship, who's never seen it from the inside, and has received no training whatsoever?
Yeah.
What is the judge looking at when they're
To
forced with
determine.
sort of like, okay, so he never hit you, and he gave you an allowance of $200 a month that you could use any way you wanted to. So I don't
Mhm.
understand where's the abuse? Like,
Right.
I get that a lot. Yeah.
It's so frustrating and I see it too. Like, you'll see it by non-attorneys. Why doesn't that person just leave? Like,
Mhm.
all the time I see, and again, I've had a lot of crossover into domestic violence issues, but it's always, well, why doesn't the person just leave? And until you've been in that situation, I don't think people understand the psychological, like, the things that you have to overcome to get to the point where you can do that.
Yeah. And
And
now if
it's
they get rid of no fault,
right.
the question's going to answer itself, right? Because I couldn't. Yeah.
Well, and it's not like a police report can be filed for, he was mean to me. He yelled at me like
Yeah.
for 12 hours straight or whatever is going on. So it's not like
Yeah.
there's evidence of that, really. It's his word versus her word type thing.
Yeah.
Or
And if he's the abuser, and it's not always men,
you're right.
sometimes it's
It's
women,
not always,
but
yeah.
the abusers are very charming and very sophisticated, and they have this sort of diabolical psychological understanding of how to push people's buttons that
Uh-huh.
normal people don't have.
Yep.
And they
Which is why a lot of people end up marrying someone like that if they grew up in a house like that. So
yeah,
it
because it's
perpetuates
normal.
the cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
go with people that feel normal, whatever
Mhm.
that is. I mean, it's fascinating to me that you can get one woman in a room of 200 men, and they will find that one guy that perpetuates a certain pattern in all of their relationships.
Yep.
And
It's very interesting.
it's like magic.
And but it's not. It's like you gravitate towards what you know or what's familiar to you. And
Mhm.
that's, I think, goes back to something you said a little bit ago about how bad this would be for families and children. Because if they're
Yeah.
almost every kid that you hear whose parents got divorced said, I wish they would have done it sooner.
Yes.
When they get older and look back and realize the toxicity in the household. So
Yeah. Because
um
when people delay, when they stay in a bad relationship for the kids, what you're teaching the kids is that this is what a relationship looks like.
exactly. Yeah.
And that's never healthy for the kids.
So controversial question then, is this a political move or a family values? To me, it's like it's obvious that this isn't about family values at all, trying to force
Oh
people to stay
no.
in marriages.
No.
Um,
It's
but
forcing women to stay home to raise kids because look at what else they're doing. They're taking care of any government funding for preschools or
yep,
education, right?
yep,
So you have kids, you're stuck in a low wage job with a high mortgage, and
mhm,
it's 2,000 a month to take your kid to preschool. So that tends to mean that a lot more women stay home to raise the kids. And when they
mhm.
stay home to raise the kids, their economic
They're
value
trapped.
goes down the longer they're out of the relation or out of the workforce. And
Yep,
you have to wait till if you have two kids, maybe they're 4 years apart, you're out of the workforce for 8 to 10 years just because you can't afford the 4,000 a month that it's going to take to send your kids to preschool,
mhm.
aftercare. And what happens if one of the kids gets sick? If you have no protections at work and you've got to take 2 days off, or with this flu, you take off the entire week because two of your kids
Right.
are sick and you've
Yeah.
got no job protection.
Yep.
So it's going to be disastrous for people. Not that it's better when you're divorced, but
Right. It's still hard, but
it's hard. Yeah.
most people that you talk to have divorced, and they're like, but my life is so much better. I'm happier now.
Mhm.
You don't realize how much pain you're in, even if it's mental pain, until
Yeah.
you're out of that fog. So
Yeah.
used to living
That's
in
one
it.
of the
So
things
yeah.
that I love the most about the clients that I work with is that I get so many
Hmm.
people who will come to me and they have this look like they've been dragging a 200-pound sled around with them for so long that they don't even realize that they're pulling it anymore. And
Yeah.
I can tell them, like, look, in 6 months, you're going to wake up and remember who you are. And it's
Yeah.
going to be this transformational moment of, oh, wait, I don't have this weight anymore. Like today is the day where I left the sled behind, and it's such a transformative moment that I can literally physically see
You
it.
can see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
I always said that was my favorite thing about being a bankruptcy attorney was the like you could physically see their body language and their life
Mm.
improve as you started talking through options. And then when they got to the meeting, sometimes with the trustee meeting, by the time they got there, they looked 10 years younger because
Yeah. Yes.
they were sleeping and they didn't have all these like racing thoughts in the middle of the night. So it's
Yeah.
I think our practice areas are very similar that way. Like
Yes.
people are very, very stressed and
Hmm.
it affects everybody's like health and wellness and everything.
Yeah.
So I have a question about Valentine's Day and divorce.
Oh, okay.
Do you get a lot of people who call you right after Valentine's Day? Do people wait until Valentine's Day and then because I know Christmas is a big thing for bankruptcy. Like everyone waits through Christmas and then I get phone calls in January.
It's very
Valentine's Day,
cyclical for us. Yeah.
is it? Yeah.
Um, January is always the most busy month.
Okay. New Year's resolutions
New
for
Year's
getting divorced.
resolutions, other side of the holidays, kids back
Yeah.
in school, no big holidays coming up, right? Like spring break is kind of like not that big of a thing. So you've got a big runway to summer vacation.
Right.
So January, February, March, April slows down a little bit because spring break and people are traveling and they just want to get the other side of that Hawaii vacation or whatever. In April, May tends to slow down because nobody wants to start a divorce right before the summer break because nobody knows what to do with the kids when they're in school, much less out for summer.
Yeah.
And then there's always like, well, I wanted to travel over the summer and I wanted to go on this vacation, so I kind of want to wait until after that. Once the kids start back in school, end of August, early September, we explode again. October is usually busy. November and December tends to calm down, except for the inevitable, like they were
He
supposed to
won't give the
drop
kids
off.
back. She won't.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. There's always at least 5 clients who over Christmas can't figure out, like, well, they say the first half of the break, but is the first half the last day of school or the
Uh-huh.
first day off? Is it the Friday? Is it the Monday? And then we're like, okay, there's 19 days, which means that each of you gets a half day. And so that half day should be an exchange in the middle. But then one of you doesn't get Christmas and New Year's. And then like the other one, like, yeah, it's always
So
that.
that seems like it would be like having a really good divorce attorney help draft your settlement agreements and your
Yes.
custody orders would be very helpful to avoid some of that.
Yeah. You're not going to get that from the TurboTax or the pop-up version.
Um,
Yeah.
and I see that a lot too, where people will have those arguments and they're on Facebook half the time arguing about these things. And
Mhm.
it's funny to watch the Facebook lawyers get involved. Um,
Yeah.
telling them what they can and can't do and
Yes.
call the sheriff. And I'm like, the sheriff's not going to do anything with this.
Right.
Again, TurboTax for lawyers may help with some things, but when it there becomes a conflict, then you have to figure out how to enforce it yourself. So
Yeah.
all kinds of fun. So what's one of your wildest divorce situation? Not naming any names, of course, but what's one of the wildest things you've ever had to deal with in a divorce
Oh,
case?
um, wow. Um,
You see so many wild things. You're
I
like, what's
know, like
this from?
which one? Like I see a lot of people with mental health issues that create a lot of really interesting situations.
Yeah,
Um,
I can understand that.
I deal a lot with narcissism, but despite the fact that most women think that they're married to a narcissist,
I was just gonna say,
yeah. And most men feel like the women that they're married to are bipolar. I hear that all the time. And one of the more common questions that I get in an intake is, have you ever dealt with a narcissist before? I'm like, yeah.
no, never. Tell me all about that.
I am so because there are abusive tendencies that happen
Yes,
in certain relationships that take a really bad relationship and turn it into a really bad divorce.
yes,
That
I can.
sometimes that can be narcissism. Sometimes it's just a behavior pattern that gets repeated. But for the ones who are actual narcissists, and I've only ever had 3 that were actual narcissists, it is a different playbook. Like there's he's behaving badly, usually he's behaving badly, and there's a lot of control and a lot of gaslighting and a lot of labeling and flooding and all of those sorts of things going on.
Mhm.
But narcissists are like in a class of their own.
Yep.
Um, my I one of my favorites, yes, there was a very successful narcissist on the other side who went through a series of attorneys, which happens, and they end up kind of representing themselves for a bit, and then they'll get counsel, but the counsel will not tell them what they want to hear, and then they'll fire that person and get somebody else, and then they just get sort of like progressively lower quality attorneys as they go through the case.
The more attorneys you have, the more
Yeah.
red flags are involved. Yes.
Exactly. Like nobody wants
Yeah.
to be attorney number 5 on any case. Like,
Never.
right?
And I feel like narcissist gets thrown around so much these days. Like everyone's trying to label someone as a narcissist that you're almost like, okay, no one is at this point.
Right. Yeah.
I just
Just
stop
because
that.
somebody disagrees with you and is sick of your stuff doesn't make them a narcissist.
Right.
Okay. We
It's
can
just
all
toxic.
be
It's all
jerks.
around toxic. Yes.
Exactly.
Now, to wrap up this fun Valentine's Day discussion on everything, how can people reach you if they want to get a hold of you?
My website is probably the easiest way to connect.
Yep.
It's www.hartginney, HARTGINNEY.com. That
Sounds
has
good.
all our
Thank you.
contact information and more blurbs about what we do, and not
Cool.
about our thoughts for the future, but we spend a lot of
Not
time
about your
talking
innovative,
about
your
that.
innovative law management ideas or anything like
Right,
that.
yeah.
Okay. And the other fun thing that I like to do is we do have a Rebel Roundtable playlist on Spotify. And so I always
Mm.
ask everybody, what's their go-to anthem when you're like channeling your inner rebel? What song do you put on?
I think I sent that to you.
You did send it to me. You want me to tell you what you wrote?
I
You told
still
me,
think that that's the song that when I was a new attorney and I was walking into a really big case, and
yeah,
I my mantra, I don't know if you're gonna have to,
that's
is
okay.
don't fuck up.
Well, no, like,
That would be my like, okay, okay. And I would listen to this as going into like this is how long ago that was, but it's still one of those songs that I'm just like, yeah, yeah, I got this. Like, okay, I can do
so Robyn's song was Name of the Game by Crystal Method. That was the one that she had sent over as her anthem. So that will be added to the Rebel Roundtable
it. All
Spotify
right.
playlist. And we'll all get amped up and not fuck things up. So just FYI.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the key part there. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, thanks, Robyn, for being here. And thanks, everyone, for joining in either on the live or on the recording that's out there. It's on YouTube. We're on LinkedIn. Facebook usually has a shared YouTube link because Facebook is not my friend when it comes to streaming. But every Friday morning, 11 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Pacific, check out the Rebel Roundtable. Thanks, Robyn, for being here. It was
Thank
fun, as always.
you.
See you later.